Good day, everyone. Thank you for joining us today in this webinar, Using AI for Academic Writing. This webinar is brought to you by IES Research and Rifle. IES is a team helping researchers to improve research efficiency via smart tools and boost research visibility by engaging videos and global outreach. Together with Rifle, a smart tool leveraging big data and artificial intelligence to boost efficiency and accuracy in academic writing. We will use this 1 hour to take a deep look into the best ways for students and researchers to use AI in their academic writing. My name is Iris Xu, and I'm a consultant at IES Research, your host for the webinar. In today's session, we will talk about how AI is impacting academic writing, what are the tools, and what's new in Rifle, and wrap up with a paneled Q&A session. You're encouraged to ask any questions during the session by typing them in the chat box or using the Q&A button. With me is our speaker, Hild van Zeeland, joining in from Rifle in Netherlands. Hild is a PhD in applied linguistics and has been the chief applied linguist at Rifle since 2018. Hi, Hild. Good morning.
Morning.
How are you?
I'm okay. How are you?
I always find the pronunciation of linguist is a little bit twisty for me.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. It's okay.
Okay, so now I think let's welcome Hild to open up the session.
All right.
Yeah.
So, thank you, Iris. Thanks everybody for joining. So Iris already said what we're going to be covering in today's webinar. So I'm just straight away going to start with discussing AI in academic writing. So as you have probably noticed, AI is everywhere, and that includes academic writing. At Rifle, we first applied AI to academic writing 4 years ago now. So this is a snippet from the blog post that we published at the time, which was announcing a new version using deep learning algorithms to give feedback on research texts. So that's been 4 years, and a lot has happened since then. So, of course, we've seen very recently the launch of ChatGPT in November last year. And that really has changed the world also when it comes to academic writing and what students and researchers expect from AI tools. And this slide just gives, an overview of some of the support queries that we have been receiving since November last year. And as you can see, students and researchers are writing us asking for things like, who's the founder of mathematics? Give me an article related to this topic. Give me a persuasive essay about climate change, etc. So this really shows how we have moved from just using AI to, help to write, to using AI to help actually generate entire essays and answer questions. So this is now what is also the expectation when it comes to AI in academic writing. So, of course, there are lots of AI tools out there, but when we look at just the writing parts, there's already quite a few that you can choose from. And this slide gives a very brief overview, and it's definitely not complete, but just to indicate how many there are already. So we have, of course, Grammarly, which is a very big and well-known one, Quillbot, DeepL, which is mainly translation, but also offers a bit with writing, Penelope, Writeful, Google Docs, and Microsoft Editor. And in addition to just helping to write and revise text, we now, in this last month or so, we see that there's also a very strong move towards generative AI. So just to give you 2 examples of 2 of these tools that you must know, Google Docs and Microsoft Editor, here you see what they've already done until today. So just giving, spelling and grammar feedback. But both have very recently announced that they are also going to add generative AI to their actual editors. So here is Google. They announced on March 14, so very, very recently, that they were embedding generative AI in Docs and Gmail to help people to get started with writing a text. And this is an example that they give in their PR, where you say, help me write, for example, a job post for a regional sales rep. So this is where you see basically also the idea of ChatGPT. You ask for something, and within Google Docs, you get part of your text already written. Microsoft has announced exactly the same idea with something that they call Copilot, where you can, within the different Microsoft tools, if you have access to that, so that is within Word, within Excel, within OneNote, etc., you can ask it to create content. So you can say, from this file and from this file, generates a data analysis or generate a text, and you actually get it for you to start working on. So it is now not just AI for language checking, but it's really also AI for language generation. And then, of course, there's Writeful. We are here today. What do we offer? For those of you who don't know yet, we also offer language feedback, also using AI. But in our case, it's also tailored to research writing. So here you see a screenshot of Word. Within Word, you can have your text checked. And everything within Writeful is really not just to help you, generate text and check your grammar, but we really do it from a perspective of, as a student or as a researcher while writing and checking, what is it that you need? So in addition to the language feedback, we have widgets like the Academizer and the Paraphraser that help you make sentences academic or simply, rephrase them, an abstract generator and a title generator that parse parts of your text to help you write or get started with writing an abstract and generate a title. So really thinking of which parts of writing are tricky and how can we use AI to speed up those parts of writing. So that was a very, very brief introduction, but looking at that landscape and, the number of tools that are out there, what are things that you should consider, as a student or researcher or as an institution if you're looking for a tool? When it comes to AI solutions, how well they work really depends on how they have been trained, right? So the data that has been collected and used to train the models on, that really makes if it works well or not. And when looking at AI solutions for writing and for revision, we can think of two things. Has the AI solution been trained on a particular type of language or not? And has it been trained to carry out a specific task or not? So in the first one, I would like to briefly look at Grammarly and Writeful, which are very often, of course, compared, and we very often get the question, what is then the difference between these two? This is one of the main differences, the fact that Grammar is very good for generic English. So if you're, looking to write a blog post or an email or maybe, a class assignment, but Writeful is really trained on academic texts. So the training data is really already tailoring the feedback that the models give. So if you compare the same sentences with the same language errors, you simply see that Writeful spots more because it knows that language better. So when looking for a solution for academic writing, that's definitely something to consider. And then we have, is the AI trained on a specific task? And here I'm gonna look at, ChatGPT by OpenAI. That is, as you might know, a large language model, which means that it's been trained on pretty much all of the language out there, but not to do anything in particular. So it's been trained to give a logical response based on what you give it. So it's very, very powerful, but it's not trained on academic writing. And if you compare that to Writeful or Grammarly, because Grammarly is also really for writing, for text revision, then it's better to look for one of those tools that is smaller and focused on that task at hand, at least if you want to get the best output. Then we also have privacy, of course, and that's a concern, for researchers who are working on a paper that hasn't been published yet or working with confidential data, but also for institutions. And we get this question a lot. What tools are using our data? So when we write a text or we accept a language suggestion, is that stored and is that used? And for this, I looked at the terms and conditions of these different tools. And where you see a yes in this table, the tool says, yes, all the texts that you enter, we actually use them to train our AI. So we see that Writeful and also DeepL are exceptions here, because they do not, in the case of DeepL, at least if you pay for it, they do not store your data and use it to train their AI. So if working with sensitive data, that is definitely something to consider when looking for an AI language tool. And then now I'm going to continue with ChatGPT, which is, of course, a big buzz around it, because it is also very useful to help with academic writing. So how is it used in academic writing? To look at this, what I did is I just went online and I looked at forums and website and YouTube videos to see what are people saying about it? How did I find it useful? Or, what are kind of risks or critical points that they mention? So overall, you can use ChatGPT for academic writing for the content. So to help you with, finding information to write, to add to your paper, structure. So once you have collected your information, how are you going to structure it within your text? And of course, the actual writing, so the generation of language. So when it comes to using it to help you with the content, we see that people very often use it to learn about a new topic. So simply ask ChatGPT, what does this mean? Or can you tell me a little bit about this? And this is especially useful if you're, a novel researcher, if a topic is new to you, or if you're a student and you've been given, an assignment. So write a short paper about this. Then this is what this is very, very useful for. But also, what we often see is that researchers say, this is my topic, I have to write a paper about this. What are hypotheses that I can be using? What will be good research questions for me to start working on? Then it can help with study design or statistics. So I've seen people say, this is my data, these are my numbers. What is a good statistical test? Or this is what I want to explore. What is the sample size that I need? So that's more a study design question. For that, because it has seen so much information, it can also give you advice on things like that. And this one you see very often, students and researchers ask ChatGPT, write me sections. So this is my topic, can you write me an introduction? Or this is my results section, just pasting all of the results in. Can you discuss these? So can you write me a discussion based on these results? And this is one brief example of a researcher on YouTube called Science Grad School Coach, who has quite a lot of subscribers as well, and who said, this is my paper, I'm writing a research article on this topic. Can you write me an introduction paragraph? And then just seeing what ChatGPT comes up with and using that to start, editing and finding bits, and then perhaps looking for additional papers to verify or to add to it. Ask ideas for follow-up work is also a very interesting one, where you say, I've written this paper. What is, further research I can do on this? Here's an example of a professor that did that. So you see that he says, suggest 5 ideas for follow-up work. He then gets, 5 ideas from ChatGPT. Initially, he says, the results are a bit generic, not yet that interesting. He then continues to ask, okay, suggest me 5 more creative ideas, and ChatGPT gives him 5 more creative ideas. So here we also see that the prompts that you enter, so the actual thing that you ask for, really affects what you get out of it. And then a last one is that I've seen that people also quite often use it to find references. So here's one example of a website that says, use ChatGPT to find sources. Now that you know what you want to write, just ask it to find a few sources for your essay topic. And we see an example here on the right where they say, give me a list of 10 articles as references about this topic. But this is, and you might have come across this already, a very risky use of ChatGPT because it simply makes up references. So if you ask it for references on a topic, what it typically does is it comes up with a reference list with references that look very plausible, with journal titles that seem very real. However, again, they are just made up of what it thinks is very logical, and they do often not exist. Often even with DOIs that, don't go anywhere, that are not real. So that is definitely something to keep in mind. And you also see it in this example, where, the 10 references given, almost all of them have either a Smith or a Jones in them. So that really shows how ChatGPT is just spitting based on, what it has seen most in its training data, which are the most common names in English. Then we have structure. So people use it, for example, to say, can I get a generic skeleton? So I'm writing an essay or I'm writing a thesis. What should go in there? What is the usual structure for this? But also, this is my topic. Can you give me relevant headings and relevant subheadings? So it can actually give you a whole logical outline for a paper based on your topic. So we have here an example by Dr. Alex Young, also on YouTube, who does exactly this. He says, this is my essay title, or this is my chapter. You are an academic essay writer, and I want you to write 4 subheadings for the first chapter. And as you see, ChatGPT outputs 4 possible subheadings. So it's not just the structure, it's also thinking about the contents, based on the topic. This is what ChatGPT would expect to see in that essay. So you can imagine that for students, especially who get a topic that they are not very familiar with yet, this is definitely a good starting point. But like the professor that we saw before, he also says, if I then ask ChatGPT to write me actual text, I see that what I get is not of very high quality. There are no references, and it's just quite generic. So it gives you very useful text to start working from, and perhaps to use a bit as a brainstorm to get general background information, but it's not very creative or very original. So that's, again, something to keep in mind. Then we have, of course, the writing part. What I've seen quite a lot is that people say to ChatGPT, this is my abstract. It is now 300 words. Can you try cut it down to 250 or 200 words? So simply to shorten text, which is, of course, quite difficult and time-consuming to do. Come up with a good title, or write an abstract. So say, this is my paper, write me an abstract. So that's quite similar to the abstract generator that Writeful has. Write a press release. That's also an interesting one, where, this is often with lab research the case, where, you've done a study, you have findings, you want to present them in a press release in a nice way. That's definitely something that it can help with. And then we have persuasive language, which is something I came across in a video by Andy Stapleton, who said rightly that, for doing research, it's very important to use persuasive language. If you want to get grants in, if you want to get your papers accepted, and you have to write editors, journal editors, a letter, it's important that you know how to use language well. And for this, ChatGPT can also be useful, where you say, this is some factual information, please rewrite it for me to make it more persuasive. And he even says, from here on, as all researchers are going to be using tools like this, it is going to be much, much harder for these grant reviewers to decide between grant applications. Because right now you can still use it to stand out, but very soon, perhaps all researchers are going to be using ChatGPT for this. And how do you still distinguish between really good proposals or less, perhaps a bit weaker proposals, if at least the language is very good for all of them? So based on this ChatGPT part, how can you or should you not use it for academic writing? In general, it seems to be really good for brainstorming, getting introduced to a topic, structuring your paper, quick ideas for example, titles, persuasive language. So it's really a very good tool for a lot of things in research writing. But it's important to remember that it's not a research tool. What it is a language model. So what it has been trained to do is to, given text, so given a prompt, to respond with logical text. So it's not a database of facts. It's not something like the Wikipedia or, you know, a scholarly source like Scopus, where you can really draw information from in a structured way. So whatever you get from ChatGPT, it's important to always do fact checking. And it's also important to remember that the content, as we've seen also in these YouTube videos, is not really original. And of course, for your own research, what you always want to do is go to these scholarly databases, go through actual papers, read, make sense that all the information is correct if you do get it from ChatGPT, and then reflect on it yourself. Then also, how are publishers and institutions responding to these developments? What we see, and we as Rightful also, what we hear quite often from institutions, is that there are a lot of concerns around using AI tools for their students and their researchers. So first of all, the concern of privacy. So what do all of these AI tools do with our students' data? So all of the texts that are entered, are they used? And if so, how are they used? Where are they stored? So this is something that I of course mentioned also before. Then assessment and writing and language assessment. If students are all going to be using AI tools, how do we still assess the skill of individual students? You know, how do we still manage to do that? How do we know who used AI and who didn't? And then plagiarism. So we see, and of course, that's also, you know, a logical consequence, that students simply start getting text from GPT, submitting them as their own work. So that is actually seen as plagiarism. But how do teachers, how do they tell what's real or what isn't? We also see that many universities have decided to ban ChatGPT, at least for the time being. So they have said, you know, at least until we know how to educate our students, until we have strict policies in place, we are just banning it. And you see on these slides some examples of universities that have done so already. But also publishers. So as an author, can you use AI? And if so, how? And should you acknowledge it? So we looked at several publishers, and we see that what they all say is, if you use AI, use it responsibly and carefully. Many of them, Elsevier, Taylor and Francis, Nature and Sage, they say on their website that if you use AI, you must acknowledge this. So you must often, in an actual statement on your paper, say, I have used, you know, AI such as ChatGPT. Science goes a step further and says, if you want to use AI generated text, it has to first be approved by the journal editor. And all of them also say that if an AI tool has been used to generate part of the paper, it cannot be listed as a co-author because it is simply not a human being. And that might sound logical, but we actually see that there have been papers that have been published with ChatGPT as a co-author, which sounds very fair, but it does look a bit funny to see it here as if it is a real person. And if you click on the envelope to send an email, you actually go to OpenAI support. So it is happening, and it happened here within Elsevier, probably before they actually put this policy in place to no longer allow this. So what I now want to do is to briefly show you 3 new Rightful features that are also kind of part of this whole AI discussion, AI development, which are these. We have a GPT detector that we recently added, TechGPT within Rightful for Overleaf, and a dashboard to monitor academic language skill. So the GPT detector, to start with that one, we added this, of course, because we see this growing concern of AI plagiarism that I mentioned before, coming from institutions, especially that write us and say, how do we know if students' work is actually their own, or if it's been fully or partly taken from GPT? So there are more GPT detectors out there, and we as Rightful also have our own, which I'm now going to briefly show you. So it's available from x.rightful.com, which is like the other widgets, freely available up to, with a daily limit. So you have a daily quota. And you can simply enter the text here that you want to have checked. I'm now just going to take the examples that we have here on the website. So this is text that has actually been written by a human. So we took this from a website about art history, and we see it's about Van Gogh. And we can simply ask it to check, and it already tells us it's 1% likely that this comes from any of the GPT variants, which of course is correct because this has been written by a human. We also have an example for ChatGPT. So this is text that was outputted by GPT-3 at the time. And we say check, and it says 95% likely this comes from GPT-3. So at least as a teacher, you know, even though this is not always, it's not black and white, you know, it really depends on the level of GPT, first of all, because of course GPT is also getting better, more human-like. And it also depends on to what extent a student has already been editing the text, of course. But overall, this is really a useful tool to teachers as well as publishers who are also starting to use these GPT detectors to see how likely is it that this manuscript or part of this manuscript doesn't come directly from the author or the co-authors. So that's the GPT detector. Then we have TechGPT, which is a new feature that we recently added to Writeful for Overleaf, and that is now in beta for our premium users there. And what this does is this combines Writeful's language models with GPT to help people generate LaTeX. And if you're not familiar with LaTeX, this is where you see LaTeX within Overleaf. So all of these pieces of syntax here are pieces of LaTeX that the author adds to add formatting or structure to the file to later show it neatly within the PDF. And of course, for authors, they might, you know, at some point they become more fluent with entering LaTeX, but very often if you want to do something in particular, like you want to add a figure or a table or a complicated formula, it can be quite consuming to write LaTeX like this. So what TechGPT does is it's right here. It helps the author, you know, the author can basically ask it anything to do with LaTeX within Overleaf, and it helps it here by showing how to do so. And if the author wants to use it, they can straight away insert it within their editor in Overleaf. So a few examples, you know, add this equation. How do you add a figure centered on the page? Can you create a skeleton for a paper to be submitted to archive, etc. So if I just click one here, it says this is how you do it, and you can say insert if you want to use that within the Overleaf editor straight away. So you can see that this really saves quite a bit of time. I can also say how do I add a table with 2 rows and 5 columns, and see what it gives us. To add a table with 2 rows and 5 columns, you can use the following LaTeX code. And I can say copy or insert to have it inserted into my Overleaf editor. So as I said before, this is now only for premium users because we're really testing to see how are people using it, how are people liking it, etc. But this is, again, a way of, you know, using generative AI, partly drawing from GPT to help the research writing process. So again, trying to find a way of, you know, in a tailored way for researchers to use generative AI. Then the third thing I wanted to show you is a dashboard that we are now developing together with a university, the Free University of Amsterdam here in the Netherlands. They approached us saying, we find it difficult to track how well students are writing, you know, and that is probably becoming harder now with many students using AI. How do you still see what, you know, how proficient the actual student is, and how this changes over time, you know, across semesters, across different courses, with different teachers, etc. So we are now developing this dashboard together, which looks like this and which can be accessed from within the Writeful account. You can here say start date, end dates. And you go down and you see the total number of suggestions that Writeful has given that particular student in the selected period. So in this case, I can see I have 64 edits in grammar, 6 edits received in vocabulary, 15 in punctuation, etc. So this already gives me a rough idea of how I'm doing with these different parts of my academic writing. But going down, I also see over time how I'm doing with these different aspects. So the total is the total number of edits I have received per 100 words. So here it is normalized. And I can here, select or deselect ones to show in the graph. And here I can also select a lot more types and subtypes of feedback. So how is my subject-verb agreement doing? How is my tense? How am I using word forms in my writing, etc.? So we expect that, for students over time, it's very, very useful to see how are they doing, but also for teachers when they have, a full class of students, 40 individual students, what are their strong points or what are the points that they need to focus on in their class or in additional materials to make students develop those parts of their writing. And here at the bottom, you see a table that gives a bit more information about the types with an example of the edits that Writeful might have given and a Learn More link. And in this case, this link goes to the website of this university that we are working with. So universities can also say to us, yes, we would like to implement this dashboards, but we have our own website with writing tips that we want to link to from the table. So it's all really encouraging the students to look at the tips and to improve their writing using the dashboards. So this was a demo that I wanted to show you with the 3 tools, and that was it. So I'm just now going to show you the thank you screen, and I guess it's open for Q&A.
Right. Thank you, Hugh. I think this presentation, I think I get a lot of things from it because you gave us a lot of examples of how researchers are using ChatGPT to generate ideas, analyze data, etc. So, but I kind of wonder because you also mentioned that because, for example, our audience are probably either PhD students or researchers. They have the need to write a research paper. But as you mentioned that the academic publishers, they are also having policies to wants researchers or wants authors to acknowledge if an AI tool is used. So I can understand if ChatGPT is used, of course, it needs to be acknowledged. But what about they're using tools like Writeful? Simply, it is also an AI tool, but it is simply doing, proofreading for you, polish the text.
Yeah. Well, we see that publishers actually really encourage authors to use tools like Writeful. We also have a lot of partnerships with publishers where they offer Writeful to their authors before they are submitting, because the publishers want the manuscripts to be as well written as they can be. So they ask their authors, please use Writeful so that you increase your chances of your paper being accepted. And of course, we get better written paper, so we don't have to spend so much time and money copy editing the papers that we get. So I think they have more of a problem with generative AI like ChatGPT, because then the content also becomes a part of it, right? That you don't know who thought of this, who used the literature, who did the thinking here. Is it GPT or is it the author? So I think the research has to be genuine, but to then use an AI tool to do the language parts, I think they're all very happy for authors to do that.
Okay, right. Now, because I already asked my first question, so actually it's the Q&A section. We welcome any questions, and feel free to type in your questions in the chat box or the Q&A button at the Zoom window, so we can pick them up and answer it by Hild or by another panelist that we invite to join. And another panelist that we have here is the Chief Consultant of IES Research, Dr. Wang Weifu. Weifu is actually a researcher himself, and also he has extensive experiences in talking to researchers and helping them to increase their research visibility. Hi, Weifu.
Hi.
So as we are waiting for the answers to coming in, probably I think we can share a little bit on how the ChatGPT is accepted and also how these such AI tools are actually being welcomed or actually be considered in the research cycle. So I would like to ask Weifu first on your experiences, because you talk to a lot of researchers and you also see the rise of AI tools and then the coming of ChatGPT. Can you share us a little bit on your observation in the Asia Pacific region on how people's acceptance or perspective in using such AI tools in the research workflow?
Yeah.
Right.
Do you want to go first, or?
Yeah, Hild, I will ask about the Europe sites later. Probably Weifu can share us on the APEC side first.
Sure. I guess when ChatGPT came into the pictures, there's sort of a lot of excitement. Not sure for good or bad, but I guess people suddenly realized that there could something that you could rely on and make your life a lot easier. But then flip side, that people start thinking and worry about it could be a threat. Now, I have to say that it comes from two different mindsets. And when people start talking about AI this day, there are two types of mindset. One, you're looking at automation, and the other one, you look at augmentation. Now, that's quite foundational, because when you think about automation, it's pretty much like you're buying a washing machine and you never wash clothing by yourself anymore, right? You just throw everything in and say, all your dirty laundry were taken care of, and forget about the art of washing clothing. But then you think about augmentation is an assistant. It's something to help you to do a better job that probably you can't do faster, better, more accurate because of the way it worked in the old day. So when I was a researcher as a student, I spent lots of time in the library. I'm not sure what I was doing, except I think I do a lot of photocopying. Because in the old day, you had to carry that heavy journal, read through, photocopying, and those kind of things. Sound like very manual. If someone who's doing a research today, they say that is pretty much an old antique way of doing research. It's true. So I guess in Asia, it's really a mixed bag at the moment. Some like it, some dislike it. I guess they're all coming from a very concerned, yet they want to embrace it. Take, for example, like in Singapore, we know the Ministry of Education trying to embrace it. They even metaphor it like a calculator in the early day. So is calculator something that is good or bad? Well, it depends, right? If your kid's starting to learn very simple mathematics, you better not give him or her a calculator. But I think most of us using that nowadays, if you realize that we are not paying our bill properly. So I guess the straightforward answer is a mixed bag, and everything is still changing. And I think like what Hugh said early on, that also affect a lot of new policy emerging right now, whether it's for publishing, for research, publication, or acknowledgement. In fact, I saw one question in the chat right now, like asking how to acknowledge AI paper. That is kind of pretty true. But I will leave it to Hugh to answer that question.
I think that's I think that should just go in the acknowledgement section, where you would also acknowledge, people that have helped you with your data analysis. You can simply say, I would like to acknowledge the support. I don't know how you would word it, but probably, and that's something to ask the journal, because they probably have expectations for that as well. But that's where I would expect it would go. But I think here it's also many journals you see, many publishers are also still kind of thinking, how do we do this? How do we approach this? So I wouldn't be surprised that if you look on a journal's website that they don't have specific guidelines yet on how exactly you do this, because it is so new everywhere. It's really within, the last few months that, I mean, we see that Elsevier has papers online where ChatGPT is still showing as a co-author, even though now that is just not allowed. So that's how fast things are going. So I wouldn't worry about what is now the correct way to do it, because I think everybody is still kind of trying to make sense of this.
Right. But I think it's definitely something that the publishers are looking into, because I think in the morning I read in the news saying that one publisher is actually adopting a tool to detect potential text from paper mail. So I guess the idea behind is the same, because I'm sure those paper mail will use ChatGPT or similar tools to generate text.
Yeah.
Not only text, but also ideas, etc.
Yeah, no, I mean, and we have also, because we also work with a lot of publishers, and we've also heard from them, like, how does your GPT detector work, and how would it work on manuscripts, and how would it work on manuscripts that have multiple authors, or if just part of a manuscript is written by GPT, because that can also be that's the author writes most of the manuscripts, but just a small part actually comes from GPT. How do you spot that? Those are also technical challenges, but we do see that publishers are definitely looking for a way to respond to this and to kind of guard the quality of the manuscripts.
Right. I also see an interesting question in the chat, in the Q&A that echoes with our previous conversation regarding the attitudes of the, for example, educators. So the question is, what would be your advice to educators who probably see AI as a threat in education instead of taking advantage of the technology? Hild, would you like to share your thoughts?
Yeah, I think what I've seen here is that universities, because everybody acknowledges that at least GPT is problematic in the sense that you don't know anymore what comes from the students. So people are here looking for other ways to evaluate. So instead of asking a student to submit an essay, they ask a student to respond to something that has been given by GPT. So the student has to kind of reflect creatively on something coming from the AI. That is one way, but of course that's much more time consuming. So it's going to be something that schools will have to think about carefully how they do it. And I think if it comes to AI for just the language part, like what Writeful or what Grammarly does, I think it can really help to have those tools, also because they make students aware of their shortcomings in writing. So in the case of Writeful with the dashboards, that's what we also hope it does, that the AI can actually help the teachers to show, look, this is what the AI is doing, what apparently the student needs help with. Link this to your materials and link this to your classes and to your assignments. And that's how AI can also help to give you insights for your teaching.
Right. In fact, I think that that's going to be a lot new challenges for the educator, but then at the same time, it's also a message to the educator that they have to really upskill their knowledge. I mean, one of the things that I guess when computer come out, suddenly we have plagiarism, and then we heard about Turnitin. And I guess we will see a lot more of this happening with ChatGPT because it's even more handy. And I guess the teachers or the educators need to really upskill and know how to deal with that, because it's a good tool, but then if you use it in the wrong way, it can be a problem. And I see there's someone asking in the chat saying that would that lose the skill of writing uniqueness and being creativity or being creative? I guess it's all come together, because right now there's a detector out there to try to differentiate between like what we call AI generated and human written contents. And I guess there's a lot of technology behind on that, but we are quite sure to say that AI generated content and human written content are quite different. And maybe at this stage are still quite different. I will know 10 years later, maybe 20 years later, you can't see the difference, but at least for now, because the style, the tone, the creativity, the cohesion, organization, the accuracy, they all can be different coming from a machine and coming from the human. And of course, it's no longer a human eye to check on that. And you need an AI detector to check on that. So that's why I think detector comes in. And this is what the teacher, the educator need to know. But back to the question, would you lose the creativeness or uniqueness of writing? I guess it's also another part of education. Because as you start using tool, you could actually maybe care less about some of the grammar error that the machine can help you, like Writeful can help you to take care of it, or Grammarly can take care of it. But you could think more creatively, because when I also use Grammarly and Writeful at time, you know what? When I start creating some strange sentences, I wouldn't worry about the grammar because I know they'll take care for me later on. So it actually expanded my freedom to go beyond, because I know someone will help me out. Otherwise, some may be very funny. So I think that is the kind of attitude I think we have to help out with the student as we go along.
Right. I think the attitude is actually important, because the more we know the AI, the more correct concept we will be able to develop, and then we know how to use AI wisely. So, Hild, do you have any advice to our audience on what may be your opinion on the right attitudes in using such AI tools?
I think it's very important to know the limits of an AI tool. I think in terms of GPT, for example, it's important to know that what it outputs, language-wise, it's accurate. It reads really well, and you can even ask it to write a simple language text, and it will do so for you. Or a scientific sounding text, and it will do so for you. So it's very tempting to read it and to think, oh, wow, this is perfect, exactly what I needed. But remember that, at least for research purposes, it's about doing the research and doing the creative thinking, right? So it's not that an AI like GPT can replace what you have to do for research. And I think that is a very important point to keep in mind. And I think for the AI tools that give language feedback, like Writeful and like Grammarly, they're again, know that they are not always correct, because they base it on their generic training. So they might also make mistakes, or they might also have biases in the language that they output. So that's something to keep in mind, and not just accept all of the suggestions blindly and think this is okay because this comes from an AI that knows everything. And unfortunately, especially for students or novel researchers who don't have so much writing experience yet, we do sometimes see that they say, oh, okay, accept, and that's it. And I think that also relates to the writing style question that somebody just asked. At least with Writeful, it's quite careful with that. So it won't just rewrite your entire sentence in a very different style. It really focuses on the language, but sometimes it does make things more concise or more readable based on the data it has seen. And if you don't agree, just reject. So always stay very critical.
Thank you. And Writeful?
I agree with that. I guess the attitude of using tools, AI tool, is very much like you using the GPS. When you use GPS, you don't follow the fellow blindly. You might drop into the sea without knowing it. Because it all depends on data and how accurate the data and how fast the data coming to you. So yes, totally agree. When you use AI tool, you need quite a good background of the knowledge, and you must be very critical. But the good thing about AI tool is it gives you more options. That's why you have to be critical, and don't just simply accept whatever comes first.
Right. I think that answers some of our answers in the Q&A chat box because one question is asking whether the AI might generate the same novel idea if any other is asking the same question, even a different question with the same answer. And also, yeah, so basically, I think we need to be aware that the AI has its limitation, and actually human being needs to take the responsibility of using any tool that is helping us to do research or even do a simple task like copywriting.
Yeah.
Right. I think we have a lot of interesting questions from the audience. One question that's saying that no one can deny the importance of AI in changing the future technology. So this audience is asking, what is your standpoint of writing AI tools contribution in the future of publishing market for long term? So I guess the question is something like, since the tool is out there and researchers are using it, publishers are actually using it, so would that be something that we need to be aware, or something that we need to, when we write the manuscript, should we be in writing in a way that more, for example, AI friendly or Google search friendly, for example, so that when we do the copywriting or when we do the, when publishers do the reviewing, and it can be more acceptable, something like that. If my understanding is correct, but feel free to correct me if my my question interpretation is wrong.
Yeah, I mean, interesting that question, but I will probably look at two perspectives of that. Because someone also asking that if English is not my first language, should I use such a tool? And I guess, Iris, you have said early on what that means. That could be something else. But I like to go back something very foundational, because when Writeful come into picture, I think it goes pretty well to someone that English language is not your first language. And the way I look at it is that it democratizes someone in writing their knowledge. As you know, that we need to publish our work in English. It's not we like English, it just English is an international language. It's just gonna, so we did, right? So we have to use it. Now, if you want to reach our global audience, nothing else but English. So that definitely put a lot more stress to someone like in Indonesia, in China, or in other places where English is not your first language. But then again, I think Writeful or even Grammarly, it helps to a certain extent, give you the confidence of writing it without scolded by your English teacher all the time, because they are very friendly teacher, right? Not like my English teacher. So I think that itself will contribute a lot for our researchers, especially your language is not, English is not the first language.
Yeah.
Maybe, yeah. Hugh, I'm not sure you want to add on to that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think so too. I think the thing also with Writeful is that it's kind of, it works for any level. So we see that if somebody is kind of making many mistakes or using more basic English, it will correct those. If somebody has already a very proficient level of English, it will just correct what is necessary. So it really adjusts based on the level. And I think that over time, because it has been trained on all of this academic information, by seeing all of these edits, especially if you often make the same mistake, or you use the same kind of awkward or lengthy phrasing, you'll get a feel for what the AI often tells you, which represents the norm in academic writing, and you will integrate these. And that's also what we hope to do with the dashboard, to show that using AI also, that line should go down over time. You should get fewer and fewer language suggestions if you carefully look at them and not just accept all of them.
But of course, I think some critic will say that, well, with the AI too, it means that you can duplicate ideas, you can steal people's ideas very quickly. Now, let's put it this way. I think we've been stealing and duplicating people's ideas since long time back without computer. It's just in a slower pace. Now with computers, I guess it's a lot more faster because you know what's happening in different side of the world. You know, that is kind of like business. When someone came up with smartphone, how many smartphone company in the world now? It's so quick, right? So I guess it may not be a good thing or may not be a bad thing. I mean, I'm not trying to say that plagiarism is good, but I guess sometimes it all depends on how you get creative, repackage things. And this is also what we want people using the tool understand, that rather than just simply cut and paste and get your certificate and pretend that you know what you learned. That would be quite bad. So I think this is something that we have to learn and educate our future students and researchers, because it's become a lot easier to copy, and yet the pro side of it is that it's the really very powerful tool helping us to do a better job. So we have to strike a balance in between here.
Right. I have a question of my own. So with these AI technology is evolving fast. Hild, do you see more product updates or more features that, for example, leveraging on GPT to be used or to be developed in Rifle?
Yeah, I think we need to carefully think how we tackle that, and we are also doing so now. What we are doing with TechGPT is already partly using GPT, but combining it with Writeful and also focusing on the LaTeX. Because what we don't want to do is to just say, you know, here's GPT within Writeful, and now you can use it for anything. Have it write your text, have it do anything that you need it to do. Because what we want to do is to also help the academic writing process. And we also want to be there for institutions, and so that they can also, you know, support their researchers and the writing of good papers. So we are also kind of battling this, you know, do we want to kind of serve the students and the researchers to do things as quickly as possible? Or do we also want to serve the institutions that really, of course, take plagiarism very seriously and are also seeing GPT kind of as a threat in a way? So that's difficult, something that we are trying to balance. But I do think that from the perspective of the researcher, that like with TechGPT, there's much more potential of using GPT, at least as kind of a base, and seeing what can we do with Writeful's AI combined to help the researchers. So it's definitely something that we are looking at.
Right.
There's one interesting question here. Actually, I saw someone asking and say that with ChatGPT updated and become more human-like, why do we need AI detector?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I think, you know, in all honesty, we have GPT-3, we now have GPT 3.5. GPT-4 is already out there, but still kind of paid. But as they are getting better and better and better at outputting human-like texts, it is true that at some point a detector is not always going to be able anymore, and we haven't reached that stage yet, because we've also adjusted Writeful's detector to the latest GPT, and it's still working very well. But it's a good point that at some point, should you still want to say that you can detect it if you're not going to be accurate? So I think that's just yeah, that person already has the answer to the question themselves.
That's true. Yeah.
Right. I think we have many other questions, but probably we are running out of time. So I think for all those questions, we will try to answer them offline by emails. So if you, when you ask the question, you are not anonymous, then we will be able to reply that to you. So thank you again, Hild and Wei-Fu, for this participating in this presentation. And I think we all learned a lot. And I hope that our audience will be able to get back to their institution and share the ideas and concepts to their colleagues, so that all people know that that AI is something that we must be looking closely, and also we must have the right attitude to leverage on it. Thank you. So for today's session, we are already recording it, and we shall share the recording to all our participants. And for any questions, feel free to contact us. Thank you, and have a good day.
Thank you very much.
Bye.